Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with you my reading roundup for February. So this month, I actually had a really great reading month. I felt like I got a lot of reading done amazingly. I ended up reading 10 books, which is really high for me. Granted, 4 of them were graphic novels, so I got through them a little bit faster, and then 2 of them were novellas or shorter books. So I'm just going to get started. These aren't really in any particular order. I'm going to try to keep my favorite one to the end, but I'm going to start off with the first book I read in the month, and that was called Dear Ijeawele, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And this was a nonfiction book, very short. I read it probably in about an hour, a little bit over an hour. I got it from my library app, and it was really good. It was really interesting to read. Not a ton of the ideas were completely out there or brand new for me, but it really focused on just simple suggestions written very clearly in direct, simple language that you can do to remind yourself of some of the important values within feminism and how to be a more mindful parent in raising a child to have feminist ideas if that is what you wish to do. So these were ideas such as like making sure you're teaching your child how to have an identity, how to learn about and recognize gender roles, which are really meaningless, how to not focus on the idea of marriage as an achievement that you need to aspire to someday. Help them understand their sense of self-worth and value when it comes to those types of relationships with other people. How to, as a parent, be really careful about how you teach your child or focus on the idea of appearance and what you should or shouldn't look like, and how that might determine your value as a person based on your appearance. So it was really interesting. I have 2 daughters, and I definitely want to implement some of those things in my teaching with them and just be more mindful of what I'm saying or doing. I know it's just crazy how boys and girls are raised differently, as well as non-binary kids and trans kids. Like, there's just different sort of microaggressions that we all have within ourselves. Even if we don't want to be like that, I know that they're there. So I think it's important just to learn about that and to be more mindful of that and kind of recognize what you could be doing or what you want to be doing, what you could be doing better. So I really enjoyed that. Highly recommend that for anybody who is interested in that kind of topic. Next, I read a very short novella on Kindle Unlimited. This was a sapphic romance slash erotica novel called The Client by Meghan O'Brien, I believe is her name. And this one was, it was pretty okay. It was okay. I gave it probably 3 stars. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't anything that I really would remember or read again. So it follows a woman named Juliet who works as a female escort to female clients only. That's her preference. And it's a hate to love type of romance trope, even though I would say not a ton of romance. It was more erotica. But it basically, I don't want to give too much away because it was so short, but basically Juliet has an appointment with this woman, and she opens the door and it turns out to be a woman from her past. So it's a story about sort of redemption and forgiveness and coming to terms with one's own sexuality and exploring sort of that those repressed feelings and desires that you may have had growing up, and then you're finally able to express them and experience them. So for a short story, it was pretty well written. I liked the writing style. There just wasn't a ton of beef with either character that I really cared about them that much. The writing, the steamy scenes were really detailed. So if you like that sort of thing, I think you would definitely enjoy this. But I found the overall premise or story or situation to be a little bit unrealistic. But in the same sense, I understand it was just a short story for entertainment purposes. So for that, I gave it like 3 stars. I would definitely be interested in reading more from this author, though. I think that she's a pretty good writer. So I'll check out some more of her works. Another thing that I read this month was I continued on in my Hunter x Hunter manga graphic novel series by reading volume 2. And this is by Yoshihiro Togashi. And this story is really fun. I'm really enjoying it so far. My husband actually had been watching the Netflix series. There's an anime on Netflix that's of the same name. And that's kind of how I found out about it. And then I saw someone on BookTube raving about it. So This story follows this young boy named Gong, who's probably like 12 or 13 years old, and he's interested in applying to become a hunter, which is one of these really highly skilled hunter, trainer, warrior. They're just very highly skilled in fighting and athleticism and intelligence and cognitive thinking. And so they kind of, we're living in this alternate world where there's these magical beasts and there's all these different things going on, and it's kind of hard to explain, but the story follows them going through the hunter exam. So he meets up with a couple other characters. We have like 3 other main characters that we're with during this time. They each have their own reasons for wanting to become a hunter, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's just like out there, you know, it's fun. It's these crazy characters and these weird like challenges that come up. And the second novel was really just as good as the first one. They're really quick and easy to read. The illustration part of the manga is really, really nicely well done. The storytelling is fun. The world building's fun. So I'm really enjoying that. And I'll definitely be continuing in that series. So one of the audiobooks I listened to this month was called Such a Fun Age by Kiley, Reid. And this book was pretty good as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book a lot, actually. Here we follow this probably like 25, 26-year-old woman, African-American woman named Amira, who is a part-time babysitter for a wealthier white couple in Philadelphia. So the story opens up where Amira is at a party with her friends, and the mother of the child that she babysits calls her kind of in this frantic hurry saying, "Can you please come and pick up Briar, who's the little girl? Something happened at home and we have to address it, and I really don't want her to be in the house while we're taking care of it." So it's like really late. It's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So Amira's like, okay, that's fine. So she leaves the party with her friend. They pick up Briar and they take her to this grocery store that they usually visit during the day just to kill time and to play around in the aisles, just to have some place to go outside the house that she can, kill the time with. So they're in this grocery store. They're kind of dancing around. Amira's still dressed in her clothing that she went out in that night. And all of a sudden, a security guard walks up to her, and apparently one of the shoppers had noticed Amira and this little girl and reported it, assuming that it was something like a kidnapping or some like sketchy situation going on. So the security guard started questioning her and asking her, like, why are you out with this child right now? What are you doing here? Why are you dressed like that? And Amira tries to explain that she's her babysitter and that she was helping the family out and they were just there killing time. And the security officer is just relentless and doesn't believe her and ready to call for backup. And all this is going on. And she's absolutely humiliated. And she's like, let me get them on the phone and they'll come over here and they'll explain to you that, I'm not doing anything wrong. This is my job. And so all the while there's this other like 20-year-old college student. Well, he looks like a college student that's videotaping the whole thing. So the dad shows up, the security guard realizes that it was a big misunderstanding, and Amira leaves. And she's just like so humiliated and just awful. So that whole scene happens right in the beginning. I'm not giving anything away, but the way that scene was written and done was really, really well done. Like, I just felt so much tension and anxiety through that scene and like what she must have felt like and what she was going through. So I really felt like it's set the tone for the novel really well. And this was a debut novel. So I was really, as I'm sure a lot of people were, very impressed with the writing as a whole. The writing, the storytelling, the setting, the build-up, the way she uses language to build tension and anxiety in certain situations. So that was really, really well done. So the rest of the novel just kind of follows Amira in her sort of personal journey, where she knows that she's going to be turning 26 soon and she's going to be off of her parents' insurance, and she still doesn't have a full-time job and she doesn't really know what she wants to do. She's kind of lost a little bit. And then we have this other timeline, or this other point of view that focuses on the mom of the child. So we're focusing on Amira, who is the Black woman, the Black character who's the babysitter, and then we're focusing on Alix Chamberlain, which is the wealthy white woman who's like a web influencer. She's like a huge on social media and everything. So we have her and her journey or her ideas going on, and then we have Amira as well. So Alix is really upset by everything that happened to Amira, and she just sort of like becomes obsessed with Amira, kind of. It's almost like a savior complex where she just wants to go above and beyond to make Amira feel welcome and to make her feel valued. And but the obsession gets to the point where she's looking at her phone when Amira's not around. She's like trying to find out all this information about her behind the scenes. It gets to be really creepy. And that part for me was hard to understand because I'm like, why is she doing this? Why is she like going to these depths of like trying to find out all these little details in her life? It really didn't make sense, but it was uncomfortable. Then we also have this other relationship forming between Amira and this guy named Kiley, who was the one that had ended up videotaping this scene that went on. So they start to become friends and they start hanging out and developing a relationship with each other. So then there's another side of that again, where we almost feel like Kiley is going above and beyond with this savior complex and this, he just keeps telling her like, you need to get away from this woman and this job and it's not good for you and you can do so much better. And they're making you wear a uniform and it's so wrong. And so there was just a really great characterization done between these three characters, Amira, Kiley, and Elise. So we follow these characters and this ultimate buildup of events that keep happening where we have Elise becoming more and more obsessed with Amira and just really like digging her claws into her. And we just come to realize that Elise is very selfish and she doesn't want Amira to leave, and she's doing everything sort of for her own sense of comfort and her own needs instead of what would be best for Amira in terms of how to treat her and how to offer her different work and how to really value her. And then Kiley was also really sketchy as well, I found. He was this white guy that really only hung out with black guys and only dated black women, and so there was sort of a weird, I think, fetishism that might have been going on with him as well. So Amira's kind of just trapped in between these two weirdos that are just, trying to impose their thoughts and their values and their microaggressions onto her. So I would have liked to see Amira grow a little bit more within her character. The book does have a really satisfying ending though, and it builds up to this scene and this event that happens, which kind of mirrors the original tension in the beginning, but it's a better kind of tension in Amira's favor. So I did like ultimately how the book decided to end itself, and ultimately I thought the book was really good. It was really, really enjoyable. She really wrote Elise's character in a way that she was so unlikable and so annoying. And I mean, there were a few parts where I felt a little sorry for her, but ultimately I couldn't get over the fact that she was just doing everything for herself. She was a villain in a very microaggressive way. So really phenomenal read. I did the audio, highly recommend it. My only complaint with the whole book would be that the character of Briar, who's this little 2 or 3-year-old, she was written really oddly, and I didn't like how the voice narrator portrayed her because she just sounded so annoying and obnoxious. And I love little kids. Like I really, really love children. So it's not that I don't like kids, but the way that this little kid was portrayed and the things that the kid said and the way she behaved, I was just like, ugh. It didn't seem very realistic for a 3-year-old, we'll put it that way. But overall, phenomenal book. I really enjoyed it and I really recommend that one. Another book that I read and really enjoyed was a really fun, campy book on Kindle Unlimited called I Married a Lizardman by Regine Abel. And this is part of a series, an ongoing series that's, I think, called The Primal Mating Agency. And the premise is so crazy and so out there, but it was really fun. It was super campy. And it was just like a light, fun, relaxing read. So this story follows these two characters. One is named Susan, who's a human woman from a planet called Meteoron, which is a huge community of farmers. They have really fertile, wonderful land for growing things, and they have this weird system where the first and second daughters end up being the children that inherit the land, and if you're anything beyond that, you don't really have a very good future. So Susan is the third daughter in this family, so she knows that if she stays on her home planet, she's going to have a really crappy life. So she decides to put an application in with this primal mating agency, which basically matches you or fixes you up with a different planet or species that's ultimately compatible with humans, but it matches you up with someone from a different area. So she gets matched up with this man named Alex, who is a lizard man type of alien, and she ends up moving to his country. So it's a marriage by arrangement that turns into love, which is a really great fun trope that I like. So she goes there and they have their own problem on their land. They are a species or a group of people that are hunters, so they don't do farming, they don't work their land, but all of their game is starting to fade away and their land is starting to kind of disintegrate. So they're having their own problems and struggles. And the man that she ends up marrying, Alex, he is like the clan leader of this particular group of people that she goes to live with. There's different clans throughout the area, but he's like the clan leader of their area. So it was so over the top, but just what I really liked about it was that the two characters were so sweet and loving to each other, and there were some crazy steamy scenes. I'm not going to get too much into that, but some crazy steamy scenes going on. But the characters themselves, there was just not a huge amount of conflict. There wasn't like a huge amount of angst. There wasn't any misunderstandings. So it was just fun to have that light read. And then, ultimately everything works out and it's all good. But there was like a really weird thing that I noticed throughout the theming of the book. It did sort of feel like this white saviorism thing, again, which I was just talking about with Such a Fun Age, where we have this white female woman coming to a planet to join this indigenous group, and she's somehow like the hero of it all. So that was like the one weird kind of dynamic within the book. But it was still enjoyable, but the underlying theme was kind of weird. But I'm definitely interested in checking out more from this author and more from this series because it was really fun. So that I gave that like 4 stars because it was just super campy and fun. So next I read another book called A Flicker in the Dark. I think this is by Stacy Willingham. And this was a serial killer thriller told in one point of view. So we get the point of view of the main character named Chloe. I think it's told in the first person point of view. I can't even remember at this point. But this was pretty good as well. This was a book that I really enjoyed the process of reading it and picking it up and listening to it. But the ultimate story itself, after I thought about it for a while, I did have like some issues with it. So I would say I give this 3.5 stars. So this book was really, really hyped up. I thought it was going to be this phenomenal, like amazing book. I think this was also maybe a debut novel by this author. So in that regards, it was extremely well done. It was extremely well fleshed out. It was like just a really good thriller book in general for this type of genre. And it was kind of one of those like a repeat type of murder type books where you don't know if the actual murderer, the right murderer, got caught, or if this was like is it like a copycat murderer, because everything is happening on the 20-year anniversary of the original things that happened. So we follow Chloe, who when she was 12 years old, her father was arrested and convicted of killing 6 girls, 6 like 15 to 16-year-old girls in their town. He was tried and convicted as a serial killer. He went to jail, and she had to grow up knowing that her dad did these horrible crimes, like right under her nose, basically knowing that her father, who she lived with and trusted and loved, was capable of those horrific crimes. So she's totally messed up from that. She has an older brother as well, so they grow up and they get older and they move out. After this happens, her mom really never fully recovers from this. So her mother, like at this point, is kind of out of the picture. So Chloe then went on to become a medical psychologist. So she treats patients, she is able to prescribe medications, and she treats people, that way. So then all of a sudden, somebody gets murdered in their town, and it's very similar to the style of murder that her father had done in the past. So as it starts happening, we see Chloe's anxiety start to rise and her sort of PTSD come back out, and she sort of decides to take it as her own responsibility to try to investigate the crime and to figure out what's going on and to try to get to the bottom of what's happening. So there were a lot of really good thrilling parts within the book where you just don't know what's going to happen. There was one scene in particular that was really made me feel anxious, where she's confronted by somebody from a past parent of one of the girls that was murdered back in the day that used to torment them, and just he never recovered from what happened. So she has a run-in with him, and it's really kind of good and scary and suspenseful. So we have like a few people that could be the suspects that are doing the copycat murder and everything. So I thought that was well done, because I I figured it out pretty early on, but they did kind of take you one way, and then you kind of wondered if she was going crazy as well. So you had all these different sort of avenues of who could have done it. But for me, I think where it fell short was that I couldn't fully connect with all of the reasons, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So, and the ending kind of left me hanging. I'm going to actually do a separate video where I talk about the ending, because I have so much to say about it and I don't want to spoil anything. So that was fun if you're looking for a lot of people liked it. I think I'm one of the more unpopular opinions where I had some issues with it, but it was pretty good. I gave it like 3.5 stars. So next we're going to talk about an amazing and wonderful graphic novel series, which you may have heard me talk about on my vlogs, called March by John Lewis. And this takes place over the span of probably 10 years in his life. So John Lewis was a U.S. congressman here, I think in the state of Georgia, but he was very, very pivotal and instrumental in the civil rights movement, especially in the late 50s and early 60s. He did so much in his life before the age of 25. It is absolutely unbelievable what this man was able to do and accomplish and withstand. So it's split up into 3 different novels. You can read all of them separately. They're all like from different times within the civil rights, but I really recommend you start at the beginning and read all 3 of them, because it does follow. It like leads into the next one that way. Actually, after book 2, there is quite a bit of a cliffhanger. So yeah, it's meant to be read in a serial line. So I can't say enough about this book. I just don't even know how to describe it. It was just such a great way to consume nonfiction cultural history through this graphic novel media. I really enjoyed learning about it that way. I thought it was extremely effective in bringing out a lot of emotions within myself, and just seeing like how brave these people were to do these. It starts out with him doing sit-ins back in Tennessee when the Jim Crow laws had segregated people and Black Americans were not able to eat in restaurants. So they start out doing these nonviolent protesting sit-ins where they would go in and sit down and ask to be served, and then they would just stay there. They would get harassed and spit on and food thrown at them, and they would get beaten, and it was just like, to be able to withstand that type of treatment while sticking to those nonviolence values was absolutely amazing. Like, it just blows my mind how they were so brave and so strong, and to be able to do that. So it just I really loved learning about this time in our history that I feel like has been long overdue, and just consuming it as a graphic novel was really helpful for me. And it just really was amazing. I mean, I learned about all these different new people I had never known about. Diane Nash, I mean, what a amazing woman she was, as well as like, what was her name? Fannie Lou Framer, I think was her name. She got on national TV and just disclosed like the horrific treatment she received, all just by trying to go and claim their right to register to vote, and the extreme violence in the South that happened during this time. It's unbelievable what went on. So it flashes back and forth between John Lewis's journey and then his current day, what he's doing. And I really enjoyed learning about these people in history, and it's definitely a nonfiction topic that I am really going to be getting more into, because I really enjoyed learning about that. Just so much respect for these people. And again, the novels were incredible. The third one was really, really emotional. Like, for me, I don't know, I had tears in my eyes at the end. It was so good, you guys. I gave it 5 stars easily. So super good, amazing. And then the last book, probably my favorite book that I read this month, was called Kindred by Octavia Butler. And I didn't know a ton about this before I went into it. I know there's a show on Hulu now for it, but I haven't seen it yet. But this follows the story of a young woman, she's probably like 26, 27 years old, named Dana, who lives, it takes place, the present day is the 1970s. So she lives with her white husband in San Francisco. And one day she just feels really faint and dizzy, and she falls to the ground, and she wakes up and finds that she's in like the 1800s Maryland antebellum South. So she kind of comes to and she sees this little boy about 4 years old, this little white child drowning in the pond. So she just, without thinking, she goes in and she saves him and she starts doing CPR on him. And then the parents run over and all of a sudden she's confronted with like a gun in her face and she just doesn't know what's happening, what's going on. And all of a sudden she comes back to normal life back in the 70s. So all the while her husband witnesses all that has happened and he's just like, like, oh my, like what happened? You literally disappeared. And she's like, I don't know. I was just transported. She comes back soaking wet and covered in mud. So it's like all the evidence is there that she really did go somewhere. So that happens, and that happens right in the beginning. And then we find that it keeps happening to her. So just out of the blue, she'll start feeling dizzy and she'll just be transported back to the South. So she keeps coming back a little bit later in the boy's life, even though only days are going by for the present day, like years are passing in the past. So we find out that she's somehow linked with this man, this child named Rufus. So each time she goes, she ends up being trapped there for a little bit longer. And she unfortunately doesn't have any papers when she's there, so she's assumed to be a slave. And so she has to kind of, for her own safety, she has to kind of fit this role and play this role so that she doesn't get killed. So it just was so interesting how the story was told and all the themes that came in play. And we see this experience of an enslaved woman back in this time, knowing what she knows and living from having lived in the present day. And even we're in the 70s in the present day, so we're not that far away from the civil rights era, but still she's a free woman. She's a writer in San Francisco, like, you know, such a contrast. So we do see how she uses her skills of survival and her wits and her intelligence to survive. And just so many interesting things happen. And we follow their relationship, Dana, with this young child named Rufus, who every time she goes back, he's older and older and older. And we find that she's returning to him when he needs help or when he's like in serious trouble. And we find out how she ends up being transported back. So besides the toxic relationship that we see between her and this man named Rufus, we also learn about the interrelationships between the enslaved women and the slave owners and how horrible that was. It was just so good. It was really good. The writing was phenomenal. I loved the audiobook, which is how I read it. The narrator did a great job. I really liked her and her voice and the way she portrayed Dana. It was written and told in a first-person point of view. We only have Dana's point of view. And it was great. It was just a really well done book. I really, really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. Yeah, and that was my favorite book that I read for February. So I hope you guys enjoyed my wrap up. I struggled a little bit through it because some of the books I read like way in the beginning of the month, but I hope you get the general gist of the idea. And I hope that you guys had a great reading month. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.